What's up there, workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and I put out a video on the reasons that I found some of the crafting changes a little disappointing. It really seemed to split the audience. A lot of you had very good reasons and very nice ways of sharing why you strongly disagree with me, and others felt like I said what you were thinking. So we wanted to sit down and kind of pull some things and get Brian in on this so we could just discuss this in this week's community feedback.
And what's up, workforce? Brian here, and Chris is a moron, and we're going to dive into. I'm just kidding. I love him. First, we're just going to dive right into the comments, like Chris said. I think Rooney comes in saying, "Endgame crafting has always been too expensive to enter, and it's not just the time investment. These changes are too much, and they really needed to lower the barrier for entry to Endgame." And I think this is a really interesting point. Chris and we started to have this conversation offline. I was like, Chris, okay, wait. We need to stop talking and we need to sit down and actually record this because I have different opinions than Chris did in his video. I have some things that are shared, and I think what Rooney is hitting at here is pivotal. Chris, I'm gonna let you take the first response to Rooney here.
So I think one of the first things that, I feel like my video was already plenty long, but one of the first things that I'd like to explore a little bit deeper is the barrier to entry and the definition of that. So if the goal of this expansion is to get everybody into Shadowbringers, right? Get them all involved in the rebuilding of Ishgard, because like Namatsu, you didn't have to be a cap. So if they just want you at 70 plus to be involved in Ishgard, then I agree that honestly, simplifying the 1 to 70 grind is a logical step. Going back and changing the way we interact with those items, changing the experience gains, changing the rotations, the cross-class skills, all of that all makes sense. Just like we go back and modify battle systems and the way we acquire old gear, old relics, anything like that, all those systems are just about helping people get involved in old content. So I don't actually have a problem with that, but as far as the expense, I think that crafting mostly just costs time. And so that's where I did start to draw an issue with them just removing the time of like the everyday crafting, the maintaining it once you're at cap.
Mm-hmm. I felt like crafting over the course of the game and the expansions has gotten easier as you've been higher level. So if you look at the 1 to 50, like the true crafting grind has been 1 to 50. 60 to 70, 70 to 80, that doesn't necessarily feel as taxing or as burdensome, especially with the leave system in and of itself. Now, I've always just used that as something later on in the expansion, with the exception of now, like with the help of the community. Like I've been using my leaves, and I am almost done capping all my crafts. I haven't touched gatherers, and that's why when they announced that the 70 to 80 version is getting easier from an EXP and a grinding perspective, that didn't sit too well with me personally. I was like, 1 to 70, that's fine. But with the Ishgard thing, I think the context here is Ishgard going to be that endgame crafting, but that also happens to incorporate everybody into it. And that's why I don't actually take any issue with like the changes when we're talking about the skills, when we're talking about collapsing all of that, if that there is something else. Because macroing crafts is something that completely obliterates the complexity of it. You can't do the trigger like I want to, like, this ability might trigger this proc at 20%, so it can't do that. But for the most part, crafting has, I think, been for me kind of a joke, and I say that as a Final Fantasy XI veteran. I say that as something where crafters can't craft the highest end gear or gear that's equivalent to that of the ultimate, that then provides obviously the challenge and the dedication to make that item, meaning that it's not readily available for somebody with enough gil to purchase. That's a game balance design thing, so I understand why they haven't done it, but I've never necessarily found a big reason to invest in it. And you've told me that personally time and time again, that the cost of getting your crafts up just to repair your gear will never make you money. Like, it's never going to sit here and be like, now I'm in the profit center of all of this because I invested millions in gil to get this done, when I could have just been spending a couple of 100 or 1,000 gil just to repair my gear. The only, it comes down to personal preference. So honestly, I'm with you on that. I'm like, why make the 70 to 80 easier? Because we're also going to be engaging in the Ishgard stuff. The 1 to 70 stuff, like, okay, I get it. That's the horizontal progression. The skill, shrinking, we've seen that already on battle classes, so I can see how that there's definitely like maybe it's time to have that happen, just to sit here and not to simplify rotations, but just to remove bloat. Like at some point you're like, well, I already have a skill that does that, or I already have this that does that. And maybe that can help invite more people into it who don't know about macros, or maybe that helps eliminate the need so that people are, like, well, people aren't using the system because they're all just macro crafting, which just drives people to these websites that could be shady. Like there could be a lot like a stuff going on in here. So ultimately, my monologue being concluded, it's more that is Ishgard this content that they want people to participate in, and that also then counterbalances the the difficulty, right? Can somebody go into Ishgard and just really stand out with leaderboards and crafting and be the #1 crafter, and that is the pinnacle content? We'll have yet to see. And so that's kind of where I think your video misses the mark on that, on that gap, right? Like, is something coming, whether it's Ishgard or 5.2, to help kind of complete out that feeling?
Yeah, I have a little bit of concern if Ishgard is the redeeming factor. I have a little bit of concern in this game lasts longer than one expansion. And so if you say what redeems this is Ishgard, okay, great. All the way through 5.55 is great. But part of my concern comes from, and then we get to 6.0 and we have the system that feels flat on its own, and there is no Ishgard. There is no city to rebuild.
Right.
And so then does it suddenly feel empty? Because these changes aren't just, it's going to stay like this.
Is it Eureka?
This is the new crafting.
Yeah.
So on that note, we'll move into Rock Druid, who did agree and was excited to see people talking. That is exciting when we see the comment section light up like this, even if they're all disagreeing. Everybody was really respectful, so thank you for that. The vast majority of the comments were really, really reasonable. I don't know what to think of the changes, but it brings more into crafting and gathering. It's a win. From what I see, the reduction in actions is great. As far as desynth goes, I've never done much because I don't like getting nothing for my efforts. So I'd rather turn in stuff selling seals or gil. Now I will do desynth since I'll have a chance at a reward and not come away with nothing. What are your thoughts, Brian?
Desynth is the only thing that I found frustrating. Because when we go hands-on with the skills, whatever. Desynth, I thought again, this is me, junior game developer, I was always like, the problem with desynth is that if you want to get these items to help you get through these gaps in desynth skill, like you have to go run the dungeons. There's no way to go and acquire items that you can just break down unless you're running the content. And I have always wished that they would allow, it doesn't have to be current expansion. This all kind of ties into our first comment. But every expansion that is Stormblood and down, that the dungeon gear could drop and be sellable. It's not bind on drop. It's, or your roll. That you could put it up on the markets, that crafters could either enhance it, or if nothing else, players could just purchase it if they're looking for glamour sets, or guess what? Desynth. And so what I've been doing on every run that I was running since they made this announcement, rolling on absolutely everything because I'm going to be breaking it down. It's going to benefit me. I think ultimately it's going to engage more people in the economy. Prices are going to fall, but that they're also going to be offset by maybe that means more people are going to be purchasing things. Maybe things are going to become more affordable for players so that they can afford that high-end piece of crafted gear because it's not as expensive. Thus, you end up getting more of an economy of scale as opposed to the current economic situation. But the desynth thing, I wish that they would still couple that with the fact that you have the skill gap is because the items weren't there. The items were locked behind content, and just make that content sellable, make the game more engaging as a player economy goes. That line item was why I was like, oh, come on, you're almost there. What are your thoughts?
It's the single biggest one that I was frustrated with. It's where most of my frustration started. And then the other things, if they just bothered me a little, suddenly just built up into this complete frustration. And part of it is this whole something for nothing. I don't want to get nothing. Well, it's honestly a lot to me like the Mutimex gamble. The Mutimex gamble, I can go take materia that would, let's say, sell for 10,000 gil, and I can toss it in there and gamble and get one materia back that's worth 600 gil. And so I lose all of that potential value if I just list it on the market board. But I put a guide out on how this is such a moneymaker is over the long haul, right? So I never desynth one item because I agree with you. It's incredibly frustrating to click it and see failure. When I desynth, I save up, 10, 20, a whole retainer's worth, whatever. And then I sit down and I go decent, 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 decent. So failure just blends in. And that's honestly what sets the price of demo materia. The failure's built in. They're not just charging you for the item, the cost of the item that they got the demo materia from. If it took them 100 items to get 5 pieces of demo materia, they're charging the entire price of those 500 items, whatever they think that's worth, over those 5, which is what makes it so expensive. So it's exactly the same as drop rates.
There is one other thing about this that the desynth change does kind of reverse, is that desynth was introduced as a way that players wouldn't be able to do everything, especially when it came down to crafting, because we could. They also have the specializations, which is still locked. You can pick 3 specializations for your crafts, so that still exists. But the fact is that you used to not be able to be a master desynth in everything. You kind of had to pick and scale and go from there. And they did that to kind of mess with the economy, and this is a reversal of that. Just like we got all the actions back in Stormblood, this is kind of like, well... And I don't find any fault, actually, personally, in that, because that is one of the core designs of 14, is that you as a player, if you choose to, you on one character can do everything. And so that kind of reduces that need on, like, well, if you really wanted to be a master desynth on all of these different, crafts, then you're going to have to go and do, different characters, etc. I'm just saying that it... Not everybody's engaged with it, but it does kind of reverse that, kind of the reason why it was introduced that way in the first place. So I think maybe it just wasn't working the way they intended, maybe. I don't know.
I like the trust system, for example, because I think it's going to allow Shadowbringers to age really well. When we get to the day where we're like, God, I don't want to run Shadowbringers content, we're in 7.0. I don't want to be running that old stuff. The trust system is going to allow for those new players that get into the game to not have those dungeon wait times. So I think it's really clever. But when you start to layer these things on top of each other, where every player can desynth everything with 100% chance, and every player can take a gather out and click on a node and just auto gather all of it, and every player can just quick synth with a decent chance at high quality all of their rivets and all of their cloth and everything like that, and every player can go run dungeons without other people. It starts to really, as a collective, these things that individually might be great changes on their own, start to collectively whittle away at the desire to play with other people. Where this isn't just a choice to play alone, it's that this game is honestly more optimal to play alone. Why would you even play with other players? You're better off just doing it yourself anyway. And I think that really degrades that kind of MMO experience. And it's something that, for somebody on the channel that references WoW as a comparison point, because I have a lot of years in WoW, I get accused a lot of wanting this game to be WoW. And I don't want that. It's just naturally where I draw from as this is like that. And this time around, I'm telling you guys, this is what WoW would do. This is 100% a decision that WoW would make to their crafting system, where we just simplify it down and we make it accessible to everybody much easier. And so I'm telling you, what concerns me about this is this is a decision that I think is the same mindset as what led ultimately to BFA.
So on that note, Sora kind of follows this up and says, as a fellow former WoW player, or former, I must say that I have not been a fan of any of the pruning removals from removing class requirements for jobs and how they've changed Warrior in Stormblood, let alone in Shadowbringers. At least Shadowbringers does feel a bit better. Overall, I may just wind up being a story player, and for me, that feels at least a little sad. And that seems kind of almost what you're hinting at there, Chris. What are your thoughts?
Exactly. So the tank changes, the enmity rotation, people are like, well, I barely used it. And it's desynth. It's well, barely any players did it. And to draw that conclusion to something I know people feel much more defensive of, I would say, well, then why don't we make ultimates easier as time goes on? Why don't we make Savage gear available if you just run enough daily roulettes? And it's to keep those rare. Yes, very few players ever get the ultimate items. Ever. Very few players cap out relics, especially after that expansion comes to an end. The number of additional ARR relics that have been created is probably very, very small, because why would they go back and do it? And so this keeping things rare and keeping things special is not about being elite, because no one of these things is beyond your reach. I promise. There's guides out there. There's people out there in Party Finder that will help you Duty Finder. Any one piece of content is clearable by any one player, period. There is nothing in this game that is beyond your capability. But it is so big, it's kind of like college degrees. No one college degree with enough studying and effort is beyond just a studious person's distance. Now, there might be individual things that, oh, I don't do well with math or whatever, that makes some much more challenging, but nobody can get all of the degrees. And there's a beauty to that that kind of says, I have to pick the one that's best for me, and then I have to go interact with people that have the ones I'm missing. So I do see this kind of as a direction that WoW took, where they made everything accessible to everybody. And over the course of Draenor and then Legion and then BFA, you got to the point where everybody's like, so then what's the point?
Yeah, when we remove the need for each other in the game, then it's, it becomes more of that individualistic experience as opposed to that survive together or die alone kind of mindset. The question, though, is that in the context we don't have is what's coming next. And that kind of ties to the first part of this. We met with Benny, you and I put out a kind of what's Yoshi P working on, etc. Like, ultimately, if the story is going to conclude with 14, not to say that they won't have another expansion, etc., but ultimately, when you look at 14 as a product that, will persist on, like with 11 out there, if there's going to follow this up with either kind of another MMO or something of that nature, it kind of makes sense to be able to build in a system that you can dive in and have that individualistic experience, because the population isn't there to necessarily support that system, thus the trust system. If we start to see that trickle backwards, we know that the amount of time and effort for development is costly. It's not as easy as building the trust system was in Shadowbringers. It actually is like 10 times as difficult to go put it into Stormblood and back further. So ultimately, it'll be interesting to see how that all winds up and plays it out. And so then, we aren't the people who've said it, but there have been other people who've been saying, like, when introducing trust, like, that is that they were telltaling the end of this game. Like, is this the end of 14? And we don't know. Like, we honestly don't know. And so I'm not going to sit here and stress about the fact that it could be for everybody. But if we look at, 6.0 and 7.0 and 8.0, and literally I never have to talk to another human being, the question is this even an MMO anymore? And there's always going to be that balance between quality of life, right? Because, like, I look at the trust system as a removal of downtime, but it's still, the current system in 14 takes time. In 11, the trust system was something where if you were late getting off work, I could literally go and play the game, and then you could get off, you get on, and I can kick out a robot. The fact is that it's still engineered because we want to play together. And then you can kick out the robot. The robot hasn't any feelings hurt. It's not like, oh, Chris, sorry you were late getting off work, but, robot won, their feelings are, it's like, no, like, come on, like, great, we're ready for you. You can now fill in this role. And so it's really going to core down to the design overall of the game. And honestly, if you're just playing it for the story, I think a great volume of players play for the story. That is their ultimate end game. That is where they're coming from. And more. And so I'm not going to fault it for it. I'm not going to stress about it. I think a lot of it is that, like I said, we don't know what's coming next. And
yeah,
and that's the real kicker. Is it more cool crafting content that's going to be challenging and exciting, that people are going to want to get involved, but then not have to worry about the 1 through 50? the true end game grind is the 1 through 50. Everything else after that seems to get easier. So making, if they're able to kind of correct this, same thing with the story in 5.3, is Shadowbringers this ultimate, like, okay, we're going to make this more cohesive. Those are my thoughts.
Fishing leaves, I was done with 70 to 80 in a few hours. So
yeah.
People that say they don't have time, once you're caught up, it's really easy to do the most recent stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It is that 1 to 50. And I think my concern with waiting for the second half of an idea is that this game takes on some really big ideas and it iterates them very well. So, like, the story is incredible right now.
Yeah.
The thought that they're putting into these raids looks to be enormous. And so my fear with waiting for the second half is that sometimes features in this game start an idea and then that's it. And then we move on and we talk about the next thing. And the idea never seems to get finished. There was a legitimate fear from me that Eureka was thinking of something bigger and it was never going to get there. Now, we did get Valdesian Arsenal in time, but what if they had not released Valdesian Arsenal? Eureka would have been this half thought. And so we end up with systems in this game that feel like half thoughts, where by the time they get the second half implemented, it's already time to change something else. Squadrons felt like a half thought, and by the time they got around to put the second half of Squadrons in, they already had so many things built that they ended up having to just spin it into trusts.
Mm-hmm.
because it just had to be its own thing. And squadrons, in my mind, came off of companions. So it was companions, and then before they could give us long-term content for companions, we moved into squadrons, which moved into trusts. And so before trust, and we see it with things like the duty recorder, where it just, that's it. Like, it never really got finished as a thought because there's so much else going on. I'm not saying, like, the team works a ton, but I'm just saying my fear is if we don't see the second half of this thought in 5.2, will we ever?
Right.
And that's just the cynic in me. Brian is the optimist here on the channel. But I'll go ahead and move into the next comment from Gishel Fields. Here we go again with the clickbaity title and thumbnails. Between this and you trying to enforce your stupid opinion of, oh my gosh, ARR sucks, 2.1 to 2.5 sucks on a new player, Tiny Blue Games that's excited to play it and 100% love it, as if your opinion is fact, not it's not. ARR is an amazing game. I may have to actually start actively trying to speak against you in Final Fantasy XIV communities, clickbaity wannabes. Oh, and by the way, New Game Plus looks perfect and exactly what it should be. Works as intended.
I don't think he understands what clickbait is, and everybody's welcome to disagree with us. I don't remember ever stating an opinion and stating it as a fact, but maybe he's right. You know, maybe we have stated opinion as fact, and you're welcome to your opinion, Gishel, but I don't know if you've heard of the internet. Now, do we clickbait? I would say absolutely not. We've never clickbaited. People can welcome to disagree with that 100%. The goal of any title and thumbnail is to get people to click on it. If the content doesn't measure up to that, then by all means, that's clickbait. But that's why we feel like our content actually measures up to it. And we are always trying to engage with people and have conversations. I think you put out a video talking about clickbait, Chris, a while back. So you're welcome to feel like it's clickbait. I didn't think your video was clickbait because it was talking about that you feel that the crafting system has been gutted, and you're welcome to have that opinion, that feeling. I personally disagree, and I think that's why it brings both of us. I think to actually talk about like the core root of what he's saying, I honestly think he's probably one of the most dangerous Final Fantasy players out there, and he's a part of like this mindset of the community is what I think keeps a lot of people from playing the game. I think he's out there thinking that he's actively having to defend the game and thus driving people away from it. So feel free to go bash us in any community. Anybody can. Please, you're welcome to always share your opinion. I'm always going to listen to it, and I'm always going to take that feedback personally. And that's one of the things that people bash us on Twitter and Reddit and whatever. Great. Like, you're more power to you. 100% go do it. But I honestly think that this comment in and of itself is essentially probably the dark side of the Final Fantasy XIV community, unable to understand critique and unable to process it correctly. So anyway, we love you, Gishel. Hope you have a better day. It's like,
yeah. It's hard when you see it push away creators. It's hard when you see people like Scott Zone take a step back because this just isn't worth the effort. It's hard to see that because Brian and I have each other to kind of keep things more grounded. That has made that a lot easier, and so I think we've been able to deal with a fair bit of criticism and take it in stride. You're not only welcome to bash us on Reddit, as many corners of Reddit already do. You can bash us right here in our own comments, and we will read them and we will respond. Right here, right to our faces. It doesn't honestly make my day worse. I mean, I'm not going to say that reading 1,000 of these back to back would feel good, but I look through them and I look for the legitimate critique. So I look for the ones that say, here's what I didn't like about it. So what I read this comment as saying, when this comment comes on my phone and I open it up and I go to respond, here's how I read this comment, just so you guys can, when you see my responses and you say, well, maybe you're being sarcastic or maybe you're overlooking it. The clickbaity title and thumbnail, the first thing I do is I go back and I look at my title and I look at my thumbnail. My title was that I thought that the crafting system got ruined, and that I feel that a system that its difficulty lies in time, and the time's been taken out with words like auto synth, auto gather, desynth always passes, this kind of like automatic. I think that the core, what made it rewarding for me, has been ripped out. So it is empty of what it was until they put something back in its place. And that's what gutted is. And so, yes, I would like people to click. The fact that this got more views out of the gate than our battle system video, and I assume the battle system affects more people, tells me that I did a good job of getting people to be interested. And then when you got on the other side of that thumbnail, I talked about it being gutted and ruined. Well, I didn't say, well, let me tell you about why you should be a crafter and gatherer. That would have been bait, because I would have baited you into coming in, and I would have delivered a different product. So I would skip right past that line. Now, between this and you trying to enforce your stupid opinion of ARR sucks, I don't think we talked about ARR in this video. I don't think we've ever said ARR sucks. I do believe that the ARR grind being almost half the hours between starting and cap is something that they're actively working to squish in 5.3. So we have complained, about that, how that's a barrier to entry, but never said it was anything but an amazing game. I've actually rated ARR above. When we've rated our 14 experiences, I've talked about how ARR is an incredible experience for me. And then you saying you have to actively speak against me, threats, just skip right over that. And clickbaity wannabes, skip right over that. Nothing helpful there. And then, oh my gosh, by the way, New Game Plus looks perfect and exactly what it should be, works as intended. That is the first line in this comment that really means a lot to me, because that's an actual debatable thing. We can have a conversation here. So I would say on that note, I disagree. New Game Plus, I think, would be a better fit for players like me if it had like experience behind it. Now, we've heard that maybe there was just a mistranslation there, and so it could have experience behind it, so I'm holding out hope. But I understand that for anybody that just wants to play the game maybe as role players, or wants to go back and study lore or anything like that, that New Game Plus looks like it has an incredibly easy UI. So from there, I kind of feel mixed about that comment. I agree with parts of it. It does look like it's working as intended. I wish it just had a little bit more to appeal to me, because right now, I think I would go back and level a second character before I would take my character through New Game Plus. So that's just kind of my thoughts on that comment, to kind of show how I take comments like this, because I know you guys saw me respond to a bunch of negative comments, and they're 100% welcome here. It's probably not going to change my mind, just like I'm probably not going to change yours, but I'm willing to try, and I'm willing to read it. And sometimes I look at it and I either A, realize I said something incorrectly and I could have said it better, or B, I realize, maybe I need to back down on my position just a little bit. Maybe I didn't think about this viewpoint. So maybe instead of me feeling all the way like this, I could be here instead. And that's what discussion is for. So on that note, we'll move to our last comment at Sonabend. So you're basically whining that all others will get content and things that you feel are reserved for you.
I didn't get that. That you're whining that others are going to get content that are reserved for you. I didn't get that from watching your video. I actually really enjoyed watching your video. It was good to see you actually make a video. This man takes breaks. No, so I didn't get that it was that. I felt like it's essentially it wasn't you worrying that other people are going to have access to content that's reserved for you. It's you're seeing here saying, I'm seeing a trend, and that trend is what is actually concerning. Not this one change, but it's what does this change mean for 5.3, 5.4, 5, or 6.0, 6.1, 6.2? At some point, is it going to feel like, like just like with Sora, that I'm just here for the story and then I'm out. Like there isn't an investment. Nobody needs me to craft this stuff anymore. Nobody needs me to compete in the market. Nobody needs me to save the world. And that's essentially could be one of the things about where we were talking with Benny on the podcast about being the warrior light versus like you're actually playing a character warrior light, as opposed to like in a sandbox where you're an adventurer. Like you're one of hundreds of thousands of people, and you might do something heroic or you might not. And so I think I want crafting to be accessible. I want, and I really am looking forward to going hands-on with the changes to see exactly how accessible it is, because if it is so automatic and just so passive, is the part 2 of this just like where you're just like, all right, let me just run it through. Like it just becomes like in WoW and these other games where it's all about the contrast. People have, especially on the outside looking in, praise 14 for its crafting system in and of itself. And then we go like, but also you got macros that kind of defeat that purpose. Like, is this just the fact of like, you don't need to be a macro expert to go in and actually participate in this content? And if so, I think that's a win, personally. If not though, if it's sitting here just like, you don't even have to change to your job anymore, and you're just like craft, it kind of does take away a little bit of the magic that has been around since 1.0. Like where the player economy, like you didn't have search, which was a pain in the butt. Once we got search, that was a game changer. But it was like, yeah, like I'm a crafter. Like I am actively participating in it. And to see it come so far, I'm not so concerned. I believe in Yoshi P and the devs. And the question is that what kind of game is this going to be in 4 years? And maybe that the answer is, hey, we got a really new, awesome game for everybody to go jump in and play. And we wanted to make this game sustainable for people to be able to easily play. Chris.
I mean, the number of these comments that said that I was coming from almost like an ivory tower type position, that I was trying to, I don't want new players in the game. I would love to just go back and kind of reiterate and try to phrase that differently so it comes across hopefully clearer. I literally put out guides on how to make money on these systems and how to level on these systems easily because I want people to engage with them. So I am far from wanting people to not touch crafting and gathering so that I have my spot in the market. Even when I make a ton of money on a system like the Materia gambling with Munimex, you can go check the comment section in there about the number of people talking about how I've ruined their moneymaker. I literally did it for like 7 to 10 days to verify my math, and then I put out the guide while it was still hot. And so I am far from not wanting to share the information. I simply want to protect the value of it. So to draw a more apt comparison than anything I was smart enough to say in the video, I would say this is more like making Savage Gear and Ultimate Gear easier to attain. This is more like saying tomes are going to drop from everything, which is not something like, Brian, you've called for that before, but they're going to drop from everything to the point where when you log in, if you just play for 20 minutes, you have all your tomes for the week and you're done. And we're going to remove the weekly cap even, so that if you play for an hour, you have your full tome set. That'd be so easy. That'd be so nice. Think about how fast you'd get geared up. But it would also remove that entire sense of accomplishment when you have multiple gear sets at, kind of caught up. And when you have that best in slot piece of gear, that gear lust, I think, is healthy to a certain degree. And so I want to, kind of iterate, like, I am far from wanting people to get into crafting and gathering. I think you should. I think you should absolutely try it. It's an incredible system. And if they could make the 1 to 50 grind easier, I think New Game Plus rolling out in 5.3 as its complete entirety is going to give them the ability to start considering choices that are controversial, like giving away a jump potion with purchase of the game to a new player to just get at least one character into the incredible game this game has become. ARR was fun. Heavensward was fun. I enjoyed much of Stormblood. But Shadowbringers is just something so special that getting people into that should be the sole goal. But once they're here, there's no reason to rush through it. There's no reason to cheapen it. It's already really fast with leaves for crafters and gatherers. But it should be something savored. And I hope that they don't say, I don't want to see them ever say, you know what, instead of story, let's just do a cutscene. And you just go out to Netflix and you watch the story, and then you come over here and you're handed a gear set.
They're making a TV series. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they're making a TV series based in 14. So that's going to be fun to see how that plays out. Chris, you got any final thoughts before we wrap up this epic episode of Community Feedback?
I would say that overall, I'm not frustrated with every aspect of what's changing in crafting and gathering. I think some of them, especially things like stealth, that's the one that I really think like made the most sense out of all of it. But a lot of them did, where they take that 1, 2, 3 and consolidate it down that button bloat. I think that all makes sense. I think it was just the automatic nature that I kind of keyed into that just tells me that long term this will feel less rewarding. I think 5.1 is going to be incredible. And I think, honestly, the entire 5.x series is going to be incredible because even if this system feels flat, we're going to get to rebuild Ishgard, which is awesome. So this system could literally be one button click and it just does everything for you. And I would still get to take part in something that is going to be epic that we will hopefully tell stories about for years to come. Brian, you didn't get a chance to talk about the crafting system at all since I put out the video on it. Do you have any thoughts on the changes that you didn't get to here?
At the end of the day, the 70 to 80, nerfs or buffs or whatever you want to refer to them as, it's kind of like, all right, like, really? Do we need that? It's like, I think we're okay. I think it's the 1 to 50 is really the hardest part to overcome, just because of the nature of that. And I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna go hands on with it, as somebody who's been just a crafter just to repair. Like, yeah, it doesn't make monetarily sense, but it was always something that as a part of my leaves, I felt like I was just wasting leaves, like especially when you're at cap. So it's always been something I've engaged with. This time around, it's been really easy because I've had the community help me out. But prior to that, I've always leveled it, myself and and we really kind of, you know, grinded it out. And it was always something really relaxing, like fishing. You know, it was always something that was just kind of to do as a part of that kind of the relaxing nature of it. So ultimately, I'm not really worried. I'm really excited about the, you know, Ishgard. I'm really excited about, is there something else to kind of that they can now bring on top of this, right? Because if you had this huge wall to overcome and then they put like paradise behind it, like they did with Shadowbringers, let's be honest. Like you have this huge amount of story to overcome that the community will be frustrated at you if you skip. But once you're over the wall, then you get to participate in something really, really, you know, powerful. But it is this huge ask. If they're able to kind of shrink things down so that wall isn't so cumbersome from a crafting perspective, and then put all this really cool stuff to participate in as a part of that, either on the way up or behind, you know, lower the wall. And now it's like, hey, we got all this cool stuff you can participate in now that ultimately is more fun, more engaging, that drives the economy and makes everything more exciting. Then that's great. You know, that's something that could be really exciting and could bring about new stories and new things for us to kind of participate in, and maybe, who knows, new ideas. But I personally am always a big fan of player-driven economies, 100%. And that's why I want to see more things that drive that player-driven economy beyond clamor. And that's just it. I have to run. Chris, thank you for coming and answering and putting feet to the fire to the comments. And
thank you. It's about 50-50. So.
And thank you, everybody who left a comment, positive or negative. We're always serious about that. And engaging with you guys. Whether you like it or you don't, you're welcome here. And that's really what we're about. So for Work the Game, my name's Ryan.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.
We'll see you next time. Smaller print ones, because I have the bigger screen and the...
You do have the bigger screen.
The bigger screen's a factor. So yes, I probably have better vision than you,
size isn't
and
important.
I'm probably a better reader, but I also just have a screen that's like...
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you know, size isn't important. It's a matter of how you use it.
Oh, wait, I have Rune Eye on there twice, too.